Human beings were not meant to be workers. There is a famous story of a lion cub who lost his way and found a group of sheep. As he lived with the sheep, he became a sheep. He began to walk like one and make sounds like one. Until one day, a lion noticed this strange sight and asked the cub what he was doing. The cub explained that he was a sheep. The lion took him to a nearby lake and asked him to look at his reflection. The cub suddenly realized that he was a lion, and upon realizing this, he began to roar. In this world, there is enormous value placed upon getting a job. Men toil and labor in exchange for a paycheck. This is considered to be an honorable way to live, and it is considered honorable because it is compared against individual who is given to sloth. It is compared against the individual who is dependent upon government assistance or handouts for his existence. It is true that a man who is given to sloth and dependency is deplorable. But it is also true that a man who toils in exchange for a paycheck is a slave. Some will consider my words harsh. Some will consider it an affront against the working class. It is important to understand that I am also guilty of this affront against my own humanity, and I am on the mend. A job is an insult to a human being, for a human being is a prince of men. He is a king of existence. We have lost our way and have taken comfort in the company of sheep, and the time has come for us to look at our own reflection. The man who is in love with his trade is not a worker, he is an artist. Whether he makes $1 million or 1,000, he is living in accordance with his nature, and thus his days are filled with joy. The man who works for a living and who is not interested in what he does is a laborer. It matters not if he has a corner office, 4 secretaries, and a $5 million salary. He is insulting the glory of his own creation. You may tell me your sentimental story of the family that you must support and the children that you must feed, but it will fall on deaf ears. For the greatest nourishment that you can give your children is an inspirational role model who sets the stage for their own future. Food is overrated. Man is hungry for inspiration. Man is hungry for inner abundance. Man is hungry for the realization of his true potential. Man is hungry to retain the right of his kingship. Your job may indeed earn you a living, but it will not earn your life. It may put food on your table, but it will not nourish you. It may provide you with drink, but it will not quench your thirst. It will simply allow you to survive. And my dear friend, you were meant for so much more than that. I'll tell you to do precisely what the religions and the holy men forbid. I will tell you to achieve. I'll tell you to find your talents. I'll tell you to explore your abilities. I'll tell you to make a name for yourself. I'll tell you to make millions. I'll tell you to live in luxury. Because you are a king. Some will say that rich people are unhappy and that a successful person is not always content. I do not discount the validity of this claim. In response to this, I'll say that I'm not advocating a life of success or riches. I'm not saying that one should seek these things, nor am I saying that one should not seek these things. You see, it seemed to be a trend in the world of spirituality to discount a life of comfort and settle for a life of poverty. There is a long tradition in spirituality to demonize wealth. I believe that this philosophy is misguided, and the reason that I believe this is because it speaks only a partial truth. Money is not the root of all evil. Firstly, it has nothing to do with good versus evil, for it is not a question of good or evil. It is a question of joy and misery. There are just as many miserable people on the spiritual path as there are on the worldly path. If we are going to discuss wealth and success and its relation to bliss, let us use the honest truth rather than judgment and condemnation. What is the unbiased honest truth? The unbiased honest truth is this: wealth, success, and luxury do not harm a man. What harms a man is the attachment to these things. If a man becomes greatly successful and accumulates a treasure chest full of wealth, he is not the worst for it. But if he is attached to these things, he is doomed. And what is rarely mentioned is also this: the man who is attached to the idea of achieving spirituality is equally doomed. Attachment is a poison. Attachment is the source of all misery. Attachment to money, fame, ego, success, spirituality. Even attachment to family and friends. Attachment is the antithesis of life. Attachment is the great death, a death greater than death itself. Man is a king, but he believes that he is a beggar who must work toward becoming a king. And because he believes this, he lives his entire life as a beggar. The king is not the one who possesses wealth. The king is the one who is, whilst possessing it, remains unattached to it. Because he does not feel an intimate ownership of it. He is not owned by it. A king is not a king because of his riches. A king is a king despite his riches. Therefore, when a man takes pride in being a worker or for having a job for the purpose of receiving a paycheck, he is a beggar. He may earn a six-figure salary, but he remains a beggar. Many will protest this statement. They'll say that it is honorable to provide for one's family. They'll say that having a job in order to support the family is a source of pride and responsibility. To this, I'll respond in the following way. Every man in this world has a talent, and the vast majority of them have been taught to ignore it. Is there pride in this? Does this show a responsibility toward one's own self? On the airplane, we are told to secure our oxygen mask before we help another with their oxygen mask. This is beautifully symbolic, for the world teaches us exactly the opposite. And it is for this reason that man suffocates in a world filled with oxygen. Unless a man first helps himself, he cannot really help another. As Shakespeare said, "To thine own self be true." Unless you are true to yourself, you cannot possibly be true to another. Unless you first help yourself, you cannot possibly help another. I receive many phone calls and emails from people who ask me how to become a success. They tell me that they are tired of their job. They say that they wish to do work which fulfills them, but they don't know where to begin. I've written about this often, and I will say that when a man asks me such a question, he is being disingenuous with me and dishonest with himself. If I set your house on fire, you would not sit in the middle of the inferno and ask me what to do. You would surrender to your instincts and do anything and everything to save yourself. The person who asks me how to do something is not serious. He is simply looking for solace. He is looking for someone to sympathize with his plight. He is looking for someone to tell him that it is okay that he did not spend his life exploring and discovering the talents that nature bestowed upon him. If I gave this man advice on how to become a success, I would become an accomplice. And in becoming an accomplice, I would serve to keep him exactly where he is. For each answer that I would give him would only embolden him to ask more questions. And he would ask and ask and ask, all the while remaining exactly where he is. This is in fact his clever game, to ask as many questions and hows as possible, so as to free himself from the guilt of doing nothing and grant himself the luxury of staying exactly where he is. I will not help a man remain a beggar. I will applaud him when he recognizes that he is one, and I will embrace him when he sincerely decides to walk toward his own kingship. Once this decision is made, together we'll create a path for him, a journey toward that which is rightfully his, but only once he sincerely decides, and not one moment sooner. I do not condemn a man for having a job. I chastise him for believing that this is all he is worth. I call him out for his unwillingness to examine his interiority and discover that he is a prince of the earthly kingdom. There are glorious talents that are unique only to you, for nature does not make carbon copies, and schools and societies insist upon nothing but carbon copies. One day you will die, and when you are in your final days, how will you feel when you realize that you spent your life as a worker? How will you feel when you realize that you have wasted your entire life, never having explored the talents that were meant only for you? How will you feel when you discover that you have left your riches on the table? How will you feel when you realize that you sold yourself for a shilling? You are fortunate, for there is still time. What will you do with it? The path to Atmamun. Nature created you as an original. Originals are invested with glorious talents. Discover the talent within yourself that nature has been waiting for you to show to the world. You are a creator, and you always have been. Give yourself the permission to create. For if you do not, the world will take advantage of you being ignorant to this fact, and it will put you to work.